Shalom, everyone. I'm Josiah Geoffrey.
I'm Hosea Geoffrey.
We're back discussing the Torah Portions. This week we're looking at the portion of Korach, or Korah in English, which goes from Numbers 16:1 through 18:32. We've already read the portion ahead of time, so if you'd like to read it as well, why don't you go ahead and pause the video and do that, and then we'll go ahead and get into discussing.
In Korah, a man named Korah and his companions lead the people of Israel to rebel against the authority of Moses and Aaron, causing God himself to appear before the people and confirm his calling of Aaron, and to destroy those who oppose his chosen leaders.
So this portion begins with a few Israelites deciding that they're going to lead a rebellion against Moses and Aaron. The main guy involved here is a guy named Korah. He's a Levite from the clan of Kohath, which is actually the same clan of Levi that Moses and Aaron are descended from, and they're responsible for moving all the holy items in the Mishkan. So they're charged with the most delicate duties of all the Levite clans. Additionally, we see some other guys who aren't even from the tribe of Levi. They're from the tribe of Reuben, and they're also coming with Korah to rebel against Moses and Aaron. So Korah, these Reubenite guys, and 250 other leading men of Israel come to Moses and Aaron and say to them, "You have gone far enough. For all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and Adonai is in their midst. So why do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of Adonai?" So we basically see here that these guys are saying the entire people of Israel is holy, so who are you to say that you're holier than the rest of us, essentially? Basically, who's to say that God actually chose you? God chose all of us, so obviously you aren't anything special, so who are you to be leading us?
Korah's sentiment here reminds me of something that happened just a few portions ago, where Aaron and Miriam confronted Moses and said, "Has God only spoken through Moses? Hasn't he also spoken through us?" And basically challenging Moses' authority and saying, we are equal to Moses because God also decided we're special. But that should have been settled by now. God has made it clear that he chose Moses. Moses is the one who went up on the mountain in the sight of all the people of Israel and received the Torah. And he's the one who's able to go into the Mishkan and speak with God face to face. When Aaron, the high priest whom God specially chose, tried to say he was equal to Moses, he got corrected. So how much more when the entire people of Israel try to say Moses is no one special?
So when Korah and his men come against Moses and Aaron like this, Moses basically says, all right, tomorrow we'll see who's holy and who's not. We'll see who God chose and who he hasn't. We're going to have a test. We're going to have all of you guys, and then we're going to also have Aaron, and they're all going to burn incense to God in fire pans. And when they do that, we'll see who God chooses and who he rejects. Now, if you remember in a previous portion, Aaron actually had 4 sons, and 2 of them burned incense in a way that God hadn't commanded, and they ended up getting killed. So burning incense to God is not some simple, ordinary thing. This is a really holy thing, and if it's not done right, then God will lash out and kill you. So this is a life or death test that Moses is proposing to Korah and his 250 guys. And they accept. They say, all right, we'll do it. Now, after this challenge has been made and they've seemingly accepted it, Moses then turns his attention specifically to Korah and to the other Levites that are backing him. He says, "Hear now, you sons of Levi, is it not enough for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the rest of the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do the service of the tabernacle of Adonai, and to stand before the congregation to minister to them? And that he has brought you near, Korah, and all your brothers, sons of Levi, with you? Are you seeking for the priesthood also? Therefore, you and all your company are gathered together against Adonai. But as for Aaron, who is he that you grumble against him?" So Moses is basically saying to Korah and these other Levites, God did choose you. God made the entire tribe of Levi holy. He separated the Levites from all the rest of Israel and gave them a special holy calling. But God didn't give them the priesthood. He left that for Aaron specifically, Aaron and his descendants. And so Moses is saying to Korah, is the calling that God gave you as Levites, is that not enough for you? Do you have to go and take someone else's calling? By rejecting Aaron, you aren't just speaking against Aaron, you are rejecting God. You are resisting God. Now, the wording here, both of what Korah said to Moses and also how Moses responded back to Korah, it reminded me in a lot of ways of replacement theology. Replacement theology is the belief that God has rejected the people of Israel and replaced them with the church, with Jewish and Gentile believers, and the entire people of Israel, the ethnic nation, is no longer God's people, but rather the church has taken all of God's promises and callings. All that has been transferred from Israel to the church. And oftentimes the justification that I've heard from this is there's neither Jew nor Gentile. None of us is holier than anyone else. All of us are holy. Every single believer is holy. So the people of Israel, they aren't holy. And just like how the entire people of Israel is holy, so when Korah was saying that, he was correct. And just like how the entire tribe of Levi was called to be holy, so that's correct, they are holy. But at the same time, that does not negate the holiness of God's priests and the holiness of Moses. So in a very similar way, when Christians try to say, we're holy, so that means Israel isn't God's people anymore, it's very similar to what Korah was saying, which was, we're holy, so Moses isn't holy anymore. We're holy, so Aaron isn't holy anymore. God called the Levites with a special purpose that's only for them. They're holy to God, and they have that calling to live up to. And God called the sons of Aaron to a different calling, a different holy calling as God's priests, and that belongs only to Aaron. Like we've seen before, the people of Israel were called to be God's holy nation, his treasured possession, and his kingdom of priests. That's a calling that God gave to the people of Israel no matter what. God has also called the whole body of believers, Jew and Gentile alike, and made them holy and given them a calling and a purpose to proclaim his good news to everybody who will hear it. Both Israel and the body of Messiah have a calling and they're holy. So believers should be content with the calling that God has given them and the holiness that God has given them, and not try to take a calling that isn't theirs. Not try to take the holiness of Israel and say, we're holy, so Israel isn't special anymore.
So at this point, Moses calls for two brothers from the tribe of Reuben, named Dathan and Abiram. These two men are working with Korah in his rebellion. So when Moses summons them, they send an answer, "We will not come up. Is it a small thing that you've brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness, that you must also make yourself a prince over us? Moreover, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up." So whereas Korah had been saying, you can't make yourself holy because everyone is holy, Dathan and Abiram are just attacking Moses. They're accusing Moses of bringing them out of Egypt, which they call a land flowing with milk and honey, to kill them in the wilderness. So by saying that, they're already saying that they wish Moses hadn't brought them up, which is something that Israel's already said before several times, and they've seen the consequences of that already. But they're adding to that Moses is making himself a prince over Israel, saying that Moses is the one who is making his own authority.
He's putting himself in charge.
Yeah, when, as we've already talked about several times, God is the one who chose Moses. God is the one who put him in charge. And God is the one who brought them up out of Egypt. So by rejecting Moses' authority and saying, we wish we hadn't come out of Egypt, they're challenging God again. And on top of this, they add a complaint that Moses didn't bring them into the land of Canaan and give them their inheritance.
We already read that that's their fault.
Exactly. In the last portion, it was because of them that they weren't able to go into the land. Moses brought them right there, and they refused to enter. And now they're saying, because they didn't go in, that's Moses' fault. And because of it, Moses is not to be trusted.
Oh my goodness.
And so on the basis of these accusations, they're not just grumbling against Moses, they're actively refusing his instructions, rebelling against God's chosen leader for Israel. And Moses' response to this is naturally to be very angry. And so he says to God, do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, and I have not harmed one of them. So Dathan and Abiram were accusing Moses and basically insulting his character, saying he just wants power and he wants us all to die and he's not going to keep any of his promises for us. And Moses is basically just turning to God and saying, look, you know I haven't done anything wrong. These guys are the problem. Don't respect their offering. So he already challenged Korah and his men to bring this offering to see how God would respond. And now he's specifically asking God, don't respond well. I find this very interesting because in the past, whenever Israel has rebelled against God, Moses has been the one interceding for God and saying, please don't be angry against Israel. Please hold back your wrath. But in this case, Moses is doing the opposite. Instead of being a source of reconciliation between God and Israel here, he's using his power to intercede with God to say, don't respect them. Don't be reconciled to them. Turn your back on them.
So the next day, as Moses had proposed, Korah and all of his rebels come and they do the test to see who God will choose. Korah and all 250 of his men burn incense to God in their fire pans at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And likewise, Aaron the high priest puts incense in his fire pan and burns incense to God.
And it also says that Korah assembled the entire assembly of Israel to the entrance of the tent of meeting to watch as his men offer their incense to God. I find it interesting that it says that Korah assembled the congregation. So not that Moses did, but that Korah said, hey, everyone come and watch. And they all listened. So this reveals something that we'll see more clearly a little later on in the story, that the people of Israel have a tendency to go along with Korah as he rebels against Moses.
So with all the people watching and Korah and his rebels burning incense to God, it says that the glory of Adonai appears at the tent of meeting before all the people, and then God starts speaking to Moses and Aaron. God says to them, separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them instantly. So God is really angry here, and he just wants to kill the whole people, basically. He's already said this multiple times with the golden calf, and when they refused to go into the land, he said he wanted to kill them all, and Moses was like, God, please don't. And so that's what we see here again. Moses basically says, God, it's only a few people who are actively rebelling against you right now, so don't kill everybody. And so God's like, okay, fine. Tell the people to get away from the dwellings of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. So Korah is burning incense at the tent of meeting, but evidently Dathan and Abiram are still in the camp. They didn't go up to Moses because they're grumpy at Moses. And so it says that Moses actually goes to them, and the elders of Israel follow Moses. And so Moses tells everyone, all right, everybody step back from their tents. If Dathan and Abiram die like normal people do, if they get killed or something like that, then fine, God didn't choose me. But here's the proof that God did choose me. Here's what's going to happen to Dathan and Abiram. The ground is going to open up and swallow them alive down to their graves. It'll be something that you've never seen before, and that will prove God sent me. And so everyone backs up, and then suddenly the ground opens up and swallows their tents, swallows their family, swallows all their possessions. And they descend alive to Sheol, to the grave. Now, something that I want to point out here is that Moses specifically told the rest of the people, get away from Dathan and Abiram. Get away from their tents. And he actually says, don't even touch their possessions. He says, depart now from the tents of these wicked men and touch nothing that belongs to them, or you will be swept away in all their sin. So Moses is basically saying, if you go near them, then you'll suffer the same fate as them. You'll suffer the same judgment and be caught up in their sin. It reminds me of what we read back in Genesis when Lot and his family were fleeing from Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot's wife turned back to look, and she got turned to a pillar of salt. She died, and she got caught up in the judgment that came on Sodom, even though she had technically fled. And so in the same way here, Moses is saying, don't go near these people, don't touch what they own, or you'll get judged along with them. Basically, if you stand with people who are in active rebellion to God, then you will be judged as someone who is in active rebellion against God. Even if you aren't doing all of the big flagrant sins, if you're standing with the people who are, then you'll get judged along with them. Romans talks about how there are people who not only do evil things, but who approve of those doing those evil things. And so if we are approving of and standing alongside with evildoers in their evil, then we can expect that same judgment to come upon us.
This concept of not standing with those who oppose God, but instead separating yourself, basically extends to not having partnership with unbelievers, not joining with them in the evils of the flesh, but instead being holy, separate from them. As Paul says, do not become unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership is there between righteousness and wickedness? Or what does light share with darkness? Or what part does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? And what agreement has the temple of God with idols? For we are a temple of the living God, as God said, I will live in them and will walk among them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. Therefore, come forth out from the middle of them and be set apart, says Adonai, and do not touch an unclean thing, and I will receive you. And I will be to you for a father, and you will be to me for sons and daughters, says Adonai Tsevaot. Having these promises then, loved ones, let us cleanse ourselves from every pollution of flesh and ruach, perfecting holiness in the fear of God. So like the people of Israel, all Messiah followers have these promises from God that he will be our Father and that he will be with us and we can live in his presence, that we can be a temple of God, we can be holy. But if we want to partake of these promises, then we need to be holy, which means being set apart from unbelievers and not partaking of their uncleanness, but instead cleansing ourselves from every pollution of flesh and of ruach. We can't be sharing in the ways of the world while also being holy for God and partaking of these promises that God will be with us and we will be his people.
And then just to wrap up this whole story about Korah's rebellion, it says that after the earth swallows up Dathan and Abiram, the whole people freak out and they're like, the ground's going to swallow us too. But then it also says that fire came forth from Adonai. It consumed the 250 men who were burning incense to God in opposition to Moses and Aaron. So God has just devoured all the people who were involved in rebellion. Some of them were devoured by the earth, and some of them were devoured by his divine fire. But all of them are dead, and that puts an end to Korah's rebellion.
Korah, Dathan, Abiram, and everyone who is with them were all destroyed because they refused to accept the authority of Moses, and they refused to obey him. Even though Moses was the God-given leader and spoke the words of God to Israel, they chose instead to reject his authority. The author of Hebrews extends this concept to say that just as they were punished for refusing to listen to Moses, we can all be punished if we refuse to listen to Yeshua. He says, "See that you do not refuse him who is speaking. For if those having refused him who is divinely speaking upon earth did not escape, how much less will we who turn away from him who speaks from heaven? For also our God is a consuming fire." So Moses spoke the words of God to the people, and they refused to listen to him. And because of it, they were consumed by God's fire. And so the author of Hebrews is saying, how much worse will it be for us if we reject the one who speaks the words of God from heaven? We've already said before that Yeshua is a prophet like Moses. And like Moses, he's a mediator of a covenant, a better covenant. So if Yeshua is like Moses, but greater, then the punishment that comes from refusing him, turning away from him, and rejecting his authority is even worse. Because like Moses, Yeshua speaks the words of God. Yeshua's authority comes from God. And so rejecting him is rejecting God and going up against his all-consuming fire.
So after God has completely decimated the rebellion that Korah had done against Moses and Aaron, you would expect the people of Israel to be a bit more cooperative with Moses and respect his authority more. But instead, it says that the next day, the entire people of Israel start grumbling against Moses and Aaron and basically saying, "You killed God's people."
I'm pretty sure God killed God's people.
So when God hears this, he immediately gets really angry again, and he comes out and the glory of his presence appears before the people. The cloud goes out, and God says to Moses, "Get away from these people because I'm going to destroy them all." So like he said with Korah's rebellion, and Moses said, "No, stop. It was just Korah and his people. It wasn't everybody." Now it's everybody. So in this instance, Moses actually doesn't try to reason with God. He tells Aaron, we gotta stop this. Hurry up, get some incense in your censer, and then go out into the middle of the people and stop the plague, because the plague is starting. And so basically you have the entire camp of Israel, and people are just dropping dead in like a wave, and they're dropping dead from this plague. And so Aaron runs out there with the smoke of his incense in his hand, and he's carrying this incense holder, and he stands in between the dying people and the living people, and the plague stops where Aaron is. And so he's standing right there between the dead and the living, is what it says. And so Aaron it says he made atonement for the people with this incense. But at the end of the day, there are 14,700 dead Israelis from this plague.
This is very interesting because normally we see when God prepares to consume the people of Israel, Moses steps in and intercedes for the people to God by reasoning with God. But in this case, it's Aaron who's doing the interceding. Aaron is making atonement for the people. And so we see this really clear picture of what it means to be a mediator, to be an intercessor for the people. Aaron is literally standing in between Israel and God's judgment. And he is the only thing separating Israel from death through his atonement. And so that's an excellent image of Yeshua, how he stands between us and our punishment. Through his atonement, he is the only thing that can separate us from death. And so this shows that even when you've rejected God and rebelled against him, through Yeshua's atonement, you can find forgiveness, but only through Yeshua's atonement. So you need to let Yeshua intercede for you. Get behind him. Let him get between you and death. And if you do that, then you will be saved from the judgment. He will protect you from that.
So with the plague over, God says to Moses, all right, we obviously need to prove to the people that I chose you and Aaron. I didn't choose other people. Aaron and Moses are the ones in charge. As if God hasn't given ample reason to believe that already, God's like, we're going to give them another sign, another way to just show Aaron is my priest. He says that each of the 12 tribes needs to bring a staff. So God says, write the name of each chief of each tribe on the corresponding staff, with Aaron's name on the staff of Levi. And so what they're going to do is they're going to take all 12 of these staves and put them in the tent of meeting, in the Mishkan, and then they're going to check on them the next day. And then God says, the person that I choose, his staff is going to bud. It's going to bloom, it's going to have flowers, and it will bear almonds. And so they check on it the next day, and what do you know? The staff of Aaron is the one that budded, and it had almonds on it. So this is obviously miraculous, a standalone staff that's been separated from the plant for who knows how long. It's now budding and blooming, and it's alive. And so God says, show this to the people. Say, hey, look, he chose Aaron. Remember this. And then Moses is supposed to take Aaron's staff and put it in the Ark of the Covenant. And it'll be there as a sign against rebels, is what it says, so that they won't grumble against God anymore and die. Because every time they've grumbled against God, it's caused major issues.
Unfortunately, this will not end the grumblings, but it will be a sign against them when they continue to grumble. So after Korah and all his men have died, and then 14,700 Israelis died the next day, the people of Israel come to Moses and they say, behold, we perish, we are undone, we are all undone. Everyone who comes near to the tabernacle of Adonai shall die. Are we all to perish? So the people of Israel are freaked out. They're thinking, we're all going to die because we can't be near God. Anytime we're near God, we die. What are we going to do when the tabernacle's in the middle of us and anytime any one of us comes near, we're going to die? The people of Israel have a point. If they try to take the job of the priesthood like Korah did by going into the tabernacle to be near God, then they will die. So they can't go near the tabernacle. There should be a separation. And so God says to Aaron, that's your job and the job of the Levites. It's your job to take care of the holy things. That's what the priesthood is for. You do all the functions of a priesthood. Don't let the people of Israel do it. Bring the Levites with you to assist you, but they're not going to do the priestly work, but they will keep guard over the tent of meeting and over the priesthood. It's the Levites' job to keep guard so that no outsider comes near the tabernacle. It actually says the Levites are given to the priests by God as a gift. And of course, the priesthood is also given as a gift from God. And so to make sure that the people of Israel don't die by going near the tabernacle and trying to take the jobs of the priesthood, the priests are supposed to guard their position, and the Levites are supposed to guard the sanctuary to keep any outsiders from coming in, and so that there may never again be wrath on the people of Israel. And so God is basically saying the priesthood is Aaron's portion. I'm giving it to Aaron. And he then goes on to say some other things that he's giving to Aaron and to the Levites as their respective portions from God. First, he says all the offerings go to the priests. The grain offerings and sin offerings and guilt offerings, etc. All of their flesh is for the sons of Aaron to eat. It's their portion as a perpetual due. Like we've said before, these portions belong to Aaron throughout all his generations forever, without end. God also calls it a covenant of salt forever before Adonai for you and for your offspring with you. The priesthood also gets every firstborn of Israel, whether of man or beast. And they sacrifice the firstborn of clean animals, but for unclean animals and for people, instead they get redeemed, and their redemption money goes to the priests in place of the firstborn. So Aaron and his sons get every holy contribution that the people of Israel give to God. But the portion that God gives to the Levites is the service of the tent of meeting, and also every tithe in Israel, or the tenth of everyone's possessions. That's what the word tithe means, is tenth. So every one of the people of Israel is supposed to give a tenth of their possessions to the Levites. This is how the Levites are going to get their living in exchange for doing the work around the Mishkan. But God actually says that the Levites are supposed to give a tenth of their tenth to the priests. So God is telling the Levites, you are going to get a tenth, and then the best tenth out of that belongs to God. And so give it to the priests, because every contribution that you give to God goes to the priests.
Now, these portions that God is giving to the priests and to the Levites as a whole is very different from the portion that he's giving to the other tribes of Israel. For the other tribes of Israel, he's going to give them land inheritances. The land is going to be divided into 12 portions, and each of those portions will go to a tribe, 2 of which go to Joseph, 1 for Ephraim and 1 for Manasseh. But God is saying, I'm not giving a land inheritance to the tribe of Levi. He says, you shall have no inheritance in their land, nor own any portion among them. I am your portion and your inheritance among the sons of Israel. So all these gifts and these tenths and all of that, that's going to the Levites and to the priests as compensation for their labor. But overall, their portion is God himself. It's not land, it's God. And so God is saying, even though you aren't going to get an inheritance like the rest of the people, I should be enough for you. I am more than enough for you. I am your portion. I am all that you need. It reminds me of some things that Paul says in 1 Corinthians. He says, have you not known that those working around the things of the temple also eat the food of the temple? And those attending to the altar are sharers with the offerings made on the altar. So also did the master direct those who are proclaiming the good news, to live by means of the good news. Paul says this in the context of a discussion where he's basically saying that as a proclaimer of the good news, Paul is entitled to compensation from the people that he's sharing the good news with. Basically, he's entitled to donations from them and stuff like that. But Paul hasn't been taking that from them, even though he has the authority to take it. Basically, he says, I have the right to your material things, but I'm not taking that because that would hinder the good news of Messiah. But nevertheless, anyone who's laboring for the good news has the right to live by means of the good news. Now, Paul isn't saying this to guilt trip the Corinthians into donating to him or anything like that. He's saying, I'm not putting my own needs ahead of the good news. And so in the same way that the priests should have their portion being God and God alone, that's their entire portion. They don't need land. In the same way, our portion should be the good news. Even though Paul was owed technically the material things of other people, he did not take that because of the good news. The good news was the core of who he was, and everything was aimed at sending the good news out, and that being his life. And so in the same way for all of us, we should put the good news first in our lives, whatever that looks like. If we need to have a normal job, like Paul did, he was a tent maker. If we need to have a normal job alongside proclaiming the good news to support us in doing that, then we should have a normal job. But if having a normal job would distract from doing the good news, from proclaiming that to people, then we shouldn't have a normal job. Anything, whether we have a normal job or we don't, whether we have a career or we don't, whatever it is, it should be with the purpose of spreading the good news in the most effective way possible. Our career and our jobs should not come first, not even close. It should always be a means to an end, that end being proclaiming the good news. So whether we work and we earn from proclaiming the good news, or whether we earn and work to proclaim the good news, it should always be so that we can live by means of the good news.
So I think the big takeaway from this portion is be satisfied to serve God with the portion he gives you. God chose the people of Israel and the Levites and the priests, but he gave them all different functions. And all of them were supposed to serve him in their own way and not in the ways of the other groups. That's how each one was separate from the others. Each one was holy. When the people of Israel tried to usurp the priesthood, to take a calling that wasn't theirs and a portion that wasn't theirs, they only brought wrath on themselves and all kinds of trouble. And the result was that they were actually resisting God, resisting his will, resisting his leaders that he appointed. But he gave the people of Israel and the Levites their own callings and their own portions, and they were able to serve God as long as they were acting in that calling and they were satisfied with what God gave to them. And ultimately, for the priesthood and for the Levites, their portion was God. They were supposed to be content with serving God and let him provide for their needs and be content and satisfied with that. As followers of Messiah, we are also all chosen. We are holy, but we don't all have the same function. And so we shouldn't try to take other people's functions because we think that they're better or closer to God or more profitable, because we shouldn't be seeking more for ourselves. We should be content with the calling that God is giving to us because it's our portion from God, and God himself is our portion, and God is infinitely more than we will ever need.
That wraps up the portion of Korah. Next week, we'll be looking at the portion of Chukat, so be sure to tune in for that. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to keep updated on new videos. And if you would, please consider sending us a donation to help us make more videos like these. We would really appreciate it. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next week. God bless.